Jets. And we had a sports editor that I could do a whole semester on how batshit crazy this person was. And basically, I was at a crossroads. I knew I couldn't continue there. I couldn't continue working for this person, and I was basically just going to get out. And as Kevin mentioned, my wife's a veterinarian. The grand plan was my wife was buying a animal hospital upstate. I was going to just basically join her and be her office manager, which probably worked out best for all parties because I would be the world's worst office manager when it came to organizing finances and doing inventory. And she even was thinking maybe I could open up a dog grooming section and groom dogs, and we would have been sued. So, probably what happened, Kevin was very good friends with the old local sports editor at the Bergen Record, and he mentioned that Rob might have a job, and he basically put the two of us in touch, and Rob hired me away from the Journal News, not to cover the Rangers, but went back and I did high school sports for about 8 months for Rob. Started back with high school wrestling and did high school baseball, and then it just turned out that the publisher of our paper basically plays beer league hockey, and was wondering why we didn't cover the Rangers, and the sports editor said, strangely enough, we got a guy sitting covering high school sports who covered the Rangers for 3-4 seasons, so it basically worked out. But I mean, the moral of that story is it's very good to know people in this business. It's very good to have those networking, inroads. I do owe my job at the Bergen Record to Kevin, who, had worked there previously. In fact, when I met Kevin, he was covering Army football for the Bergen Record. I was covering Army football for the Journal News. We met in a press box up at Mikey Stadium and found out that we had just about everything in common. So it went from there, but that's why I say that I kind of owe where I am to Kevin right now. Yeah. But anyway, yeah.
What does your day consist of?
My day consists of, well, it's different based on, where we are. Today, for instance, no game today, so there's going to be an 11 a.m. skate up here in Greenberg at the team's facility. So, I'll go cover practice. I'll have, was it one story to write for the paper, probably about 450 words. We do this little up next box, little preview of the game. We got a game tomorrow against the Coyotes, so I'll do that. That used to be where newspapers began and ended, was what you did for the newspaper product. That's probably about, 25% of what I'll do today between, blogs and Twitter and, just setting up stuff, interviews. The Rangers are not having morning skates, and tomorrow is a game day, which means that I have to do an early notebook, 300-400 words of notes before the game starts. If they don't have a morning skate, I got to run around the dressing room today trying to get some, little tidbits here and there. So it's a lot of advanced planning. If I'm working on any features, or going home, making phone calls, that type of stuff, trying to, talk to agents, GMs, just, kind of keep your ear to the ground, find out what's going on around the league. Today, I will say that basically I'm going to be in and out at practice because I got to rush home, write up what I got. My wife's car is in the shop. I got to figure out a way to get her over to the shop. And then Bill Madden, you remember our old managing editor at the Journal News, who I believe you worked for also. He teaches a class at St. Thomas Aquinas, so I'm doing a doubleheader tonight. I'll be stacked at 5:30 doing his class. So, but it's practice. Tomorrow's a game day. Those tend to be long days. If the game's at 7, but typically I'll be on a 9:13 train into the city. The home team usually skates at 10:30 in the morning. I shouldn't say usually. The home team always skates at 10:30 in the morning. Road team skates at 11:30. Tomorrow is kind of interesting because the Coyotes are in. I don't know how many of you follow hockey manically. Great. Good job. The Coyotes are coming in. They have a player, Anthony Duclair, who was basically the Rangers' best prospect last season, and they wound up trading him for Keith Yandel. So, whenever a player comes back, it's interesting to talk to him and get his perspective. I haven't talked to Anthony since he got traded. Be good to catch up with him. I mean, there's the writing. Like I said, when I got into this business, you wrote 1 or 2 stories for the paper, and that was your day. But now, really, because of social media, the job has changed completely. It's 24/7. If you find out a story, you really can't wait for the next day's newspaper to report it. Usually you will. Unfortunately, a lot of news breaks on Twitter because that's where you're reaching the most eyeballs now. And what you try and do with Twitter is divert those eyeballs back to one of your products. And when I say one of your products, you can link a story from the newspaper if it's already out, but chances are you're probably linking first to your blog, try and get some traffic on your blog. You find that, the best blogs are the ones that are updated, 3-4 times a day, just so people get in the habit of constantly checking back to see what's going on there. If you guys want to see a really, really good blog, one, that probably hits all the buttons of what to do, my colleague at the Record, who I should point out is not married and does not have kids, does a wonderful blog called Fire and Ice on the Devils, and he is absolutely manic about this. He will probably blog, on a game day he'll put 6, 7, 8 blogs up, and they're all, 5 to 1,000 words. I don't know where he gets the material, because I know what it's like being around the Rangers, which is a cable vision company, which means that the media is treated as the absolute enemy, and getting one-on-one time with guys, or even getting, decent access to players and coaches can sometimes be tough. There's a definite wall, so you need to ferret out people either within the building or within the league, and again, it goes back to, agents are a decent source of material because they hear a lot of things, and if you can find an agent that's comfortable talking to you, you can get funneled some information. The problem with agents is they have their own agendas, and it's all about making money for their clients. So sometimes you have to bear that in mind when you're talking to agents. Talking to other GMs around the league, they're in the press box at a game, there are always scouts there. It's the same guys, and they go see a lot of different games, chat them up, find out what's going on around the league, what they're hearing, who might be on the move, who's not playing well, who is playing well. It's just all about basically conversations. There are other parts of the job because the Bergen Record, while it's a great place to work at, I think it would be considered, it's not on the grand scale of a Post or even the Daily News, which, I'll get to in a little bit as an example of, kind of where this industry is going. But it's a lot of your own work. We don't have a huge staff, so I don't have any backup. If I want to take a day off, basically, I can't take a day off because there's no one to cover practice for me. So I pretty much know when the season begins that I'm working, from the day after Labor Day, pretty much straight through July 4th. At some point, there may be days where I'm not writing, but you always have to be aware of what's going on at least. Yeah.
What if the team's away?
What's that?
What if the team's away?
Oh no, it's a travel beat. So, and that's the other thing I was going to say. I think, I joked about being a dog groomer. I think if there is one other job I am now qualified to do as a result of this job, is be a travel agent, because I'm making all my own travel arrangements, and that in itself is not close to a full-time job, but it is not easy to figure out how to get from Ottawa to Buffalo and then out to Denver, and within a budget that your sports editor is happy with. So there's a lot of time. Basically, the process there, not to bore you with travel agency stuff, is I have to price out all the trips that I would like to take. And, I usually go from the beginning of the season to January, and then I'll do February, March, April later on. Work out all that stuff and then submit it to my boss for approval. Usually by the time he gets back to me, most of those prices have gone away and I have to restart all again and redo the whole thing, which is where I'm at now. I got a trip in November. You would think Tampa, Florida would be an easy trip. For some reason, I'm having problems putting this one together, so I'm waiting on a couple of things. But it's a lot of, like at the Journal News, when there was a lot more money in this industry, we had a travel agent. I would just call up this guy Walter, who worked here in Westchester, JJ Travel, and say, Walter, I need to be in Nashville, blah, blah. And 2 days later, he'd call back and, I'd have my itinerary. There's just, it's a lot more do-it-yourself right now. The summers are great. Once free agency really ends on July 4th, it's kind of like, a teacher's schedule where July and August I'm off the grid. So, that tends to be nice. That's a lot of family time then. The travel is a lot of fun. The team obviously goes on a charter plane that we're not a part of, but catching up with them, just being in a different city, it's fun. I do have kids, or one kid's in college, but I have a kid in high school. It's tough to be away from the family, and that's something you consider when you're going into a travel beat. When your kids are younger. I think Kevin can speak to that, because his travel when he was covering the Mets was far worse than anything I ever did, because he was gone, 2 weeks at a stretch. And that's really tough with little kids in the house. But anyway, so yeah.
Where did you go to college and what did you study?
I went to Syracuse and I studied newspaper journalism. It was, I've often joked that I've never really had a plan B, and it was good to have a plan B at some point, especially with the way the industry is going. But this is pretty much what I always wanted to do. Guys like Kevin can relate to this, but does The Odd Couple mean anything to you guys?
Couple?
Yeah, there was a play, and then there was a great TV show in the early 70s.
Before my
Jack
time.
Klugman, Tony Randall. I wanted to be Oscar Madison when I was a little kid. The thing they don't tell you is that sports writers do not have their own office. Sports writers do not have a secretary. Sports writers do not have, people making it easy for them to do their job, which is kind of what The Odd Couple set up, but it was still a hysterical show. So, I went to Syracuse. Even before I was in a classroom at Syracuse, I was at the school newspaper, signing up to write features. That was pretty much my life at Syracuse, was working for the school paper. I wound up being managing editor and sports editor by my junior year. Junior year? Yeah, junior year. I was assistant sports editor sophomore year, and then sports editor, managing editor. And the thing about the DO that was great was, as the name implies, it was a daily operation. We didn't publish Saturday, Sunday, so we worked Sunday through Thursday. And, we would put out anywhere from 24 to 36 pages a day. Sports section was typically, 6-7 pages of that. which meant that everyone had beats. I started off covering women's cross country, and you were expected to produce, features, race days on Saturday, get the results in. Went from that, covered men's gymnastics. I can't say it, gymnastics. There you go. Did that, and then got on the men's soccer beat, which was great, which turned into a travel beat. And then went right to Syracuse basketball, football, and lacrosse. Pretty much the big three there. And that was all travel. So in college, my weekends were spent, either flying or driving to an away football game, or basketball. Went to the Final Four as a sophomore down in New Orleans. Spent the week there with the Syracuse team. Great time. Sucked that they lost the last second, but and actually, it's funny. That's a good lesson, because the one thing in this sport is you cannot root. No matter how crazy you are about your team or the sport, you have to keep that passion kind of, you have it. And I love the fact that I see 82 regular season hockey games. I love the fact that I see, now anywhere, up to 25 postseason games. Best time of the year, watching that stuff. But if you saw me in the press box, you would think that it didn't mean anything to me, because I'm just sitting there, watching the game, sending out tweets, doing live blogs. And I can talk about live blogs. That's another part of the day that takes up a huge time. But during the game, your constant updates, live blogging and tweeting, and then you're also writing a running game story that has to be in, as soon as the game's over. So, it's very focused. It's not like, you're sitting there, on the edge of your seat, although mentally you can be there. Like, we saw a game up in Montreal the other week, I guess, what's today, Wednesday, last Thursday. Probably the best hockey game I've ever seen in terms of how the two goalies played. I mean, it was breathtaking to watch, but, if you're in the press box, you really see the emotions inside. And it's funny, because I've been to baseball games with my kids, and I'll sit and watch the game, and I just kind of sit and watch the game. I'm not jumping up, I'm not going nuts, and my kids will say to me, "Dad, are you having a good time?" Like, loving it. Well, you don't see it. I'm like, trust me, it's part of the training. I'm not jumping on my seats anymore, So yeah, I went to Syracuse, and then when I got out of there, I got a job up in Oneonta. I don't know how many people are familiar with upstate or central New York, but there's a 20,000 circulation paper there called the Daily Star, and I worked there for 4 years. Spent the first year as something called the Wire Editor, which is basically I was in charge of designing and laying out the front page of the paper, and the front section of basically anything wire stories, anything that came over with the Associated Press, the state page, the international page. I would design the page, put photos in, write the cut lines for the photos, write all the headlines, and it was a year without writing. And I basically took that job because it was a foot in the door. I think one very important thing in this business, especially the way this business has gone, where there are far too many people for far too few jobs at this point. You have to be versatile. I wanted to be a sports writer. I basically wanted to cover Major League Baseball. And I was very focused on that, when I was your age. But if I had stayed focused on that, I might never have gotten a job at a newspaper, because you don't go from college to cover the Mets, Yeah.
What are a few attributes that set you apart from others for covering the same issue?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure how to answer. I mean, it's because, you know what, I think everyone is very self-critical. Because I ask myself the same time, it's like, why do I have this job? I know there are other people who are looking for jobs who could probably do the job as well as I do. I mean, a lot of it's being in the right place at the right time, and like I said, knowing the right people at the right time. But I also think, it's hard work. It's a lot of grinding. Yes, you have to, you have to know how to write. You have to be a good writer. You have to, suck people in with a lead. You have to be able to, transcribe and translate the information that's in your head and communicate it in a easy manner. I mean, this is a communications business, right? So you start with that. You have to be a good reporter. You have to have a curiosity about, what you're covering. You have to, want to ask questions, just don't look at something and go, oh, of course, well, why did that happen? You have to, I'm typically a very shy person. I sometimes think this job is kind of like therapy for me, because I can't be shy, It forces you to talk to a lot of different people, because, there's a big picture out there, but not a lot of people know the whole story. So you kind of have to pick and choose and, get all the little different jigsaw pieces until you finally comprehend everything. I think there's got to be a willingness to, an openness to do different things. Like I mentioned, be a wire editor for a year until the job opens up in sports, which is what happened in Oneonta. One of the sports editors, one of the sports writers, he got fired. It turned out he was a real sick bastard and he had problems with the police and women in town. So that's the guy I followed in Oneonta, which meant that the bar was so low that I immediately was going to be the best thing ever to come into that town because I wasn't getting arrested, so. But yeah, it really is hard work, and it's, I think it's also an ability to be a team player. I kind of said I left the Journal News because, I couldn't work with that sports editor. That's, the end is near when you can't work with people anymore. It was just a very unproductive environment. The Bergen Record is probably the most supportive, best place I've ever worked in terms of, the editors, supporting what you need to do in how to do your job. And, there are certain issues, like I haven't been issued a new laptop since 2008. And my laptop is actually, I went back into the software, I think it's from 2002. People look at my laptop and they're like, we've never seen this. I'm like, well, look, it still works. I can get on the internet. I can send my stories.
That's me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, you
Yeah.
finished your sentence, I wanted to ask a question after.
Okay, no, I often say that, like, when you look at a newspaper, you see a byline, right? It'll say by Andrew Gross. I've often thought that a story should have almost two bylines. It should say by Andrew Gross and edited by, whoever the desk person is who edits it. Because any story, any really good story should be, it's not just me. Maybe I find the story, but I should be talking to my editor. And, there are always good ideas out there, and you don't have all of them. So you really need to be open to working with people. And I do think that, the people that work best with others are often the ones that do best in this business. I can think of some examples out there of just, sports writers who you wouldn't want to meet, at a bar, you wouldn't want to talk to, just real, like, almost psycho loners. But this is the way I want to do my job. I want to be I want to have a good relationship with my editors, because I think that makes me a better editor. I'm sorry, yeah?
But didn't the guy you work with die?
What?
Didn't the guy in that die?
Mark Leary died, yeah. Yeah, well, sad story, he worked himself to death. He was about 40, 43, had 2 young kids, and he wound up with awful stomach cancer, but I think it was because he worked 18-hour days, and he pushed all of us. You know, none of us could say we were tired because the sports editor was working 18-hour days. And I mean, he just shoved any morsel of food that he could find in his mouth. He was 300 pounds, and I think he worked himself to death. But you know, but he was a good editor because he loved the process. He loved rolling up his sleeves and starting with the story from, you know, the germination of an idea and just working it right through. And he was a really good line editor. He would make the copy better. In a lot of ways, you know, he was the first guy to give me a probie, because I was working in Rockland, covering high schools there, and I wanted to do, you know, pro stuff. And he got me over to Westchester, and he started using me, you know, as backup on Mets, Yankees, and then when the St. John's basketball beat opened up, he didn't give that to me. I had to interview for it. And he said I interviewed very well, and he gave it to me. And I'll never forget his advice. You know, he calls me into his office, and he says, "All right, Andrew, we're going to give you the St. John's piece. We're going to make you a pro writer." I'm like, "Great." And I'm thinking, you know, there's going to be some kumbaya moment here, you know, where he's going to say something really cool at that moment. He's just looking down at his papers, never looked up. He goes, "Don't fuck it up." All right. So, yeah.
Thanks, George.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said you wrote for the Jets, so I was wondering, like, what's different from writing about football than writing about?
I love covering hockey. First of all, I love football. I love sitting at home on my couch on a Sunday afternoon and watching a football game. Covering the NFL to me was, it was like death. It was awful. Have you guys gone to NFL stadiums? Have you seen a game live?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To me, it's like being in a TV studio. There's no flow to it. There's, you know, you sit there for long stretches. It's almost like they're setting up from scene to scene. And also where the press boxes are in the NFL, you're sealed off. You can't hear the crowd. You don't get the emotion. So it's a very antiseptic environment to me. But that wasn't, you know, the game days were fine. What really got me about the NFL was, it was, you know, only one game a week. I don't like covering practices as much as games. And there's a lot of practice covering in the NFL. And you know what, you go into that room, you get 45 minutes per day in the room in the NFL. And it's usually the same guys you're talking to, and it's very scripted. You know, the quarterback comes out on Wednesday. That's the only time you can talk to that person. So you know on Wednesdays you're writing the quarterback. The NFL has done a wonderful job of controlling the media and really writing its own narrative. You know, so it's, you know, in the business, the NFL is really the family. You know, if you have a family and you want to work a 9-to-5 job, you get the NFL because you travel only once every other week, and you know, it's, you know, one game a week, and you know practice is going to be in the afternoon, and when practice is over you can come home, and you know, you're at home at night. You know, Saturdays you don't do anything, there's no access to the players. So to me it was not as exciting, besides the fact that the Jets are probably the most dysfunctional group of human beings I've ever been around. I mean, like, I'm a Jets fan, you know, don't get me wrong, but just seeing the way that franchise operated is like, how is this possible? I mean, how is this possible that you guys know so little about putting out a product?
It's all right. Pace football is worse.
What?
Pace football is worse.
Yeah, but, all right, but yes, but pace is not You know, you're not filling Pace Stadium with 80,000 people on it.
A lot of people go to these games.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that one night.
Close, no.
But like I said, the main thing that bothered me about the NFL was just the scripted nature of it. And, you know, by Thursday of that week, because the game's on Sunday, so you ask, you know, questions on Monday, you don't see them on Tuesday. On Wednesday, you ask all the advanced stuff. And then you still have Thursday and Friday. It was a lot of the same, you know, asking the same questions. By Thursday, the players were sick of answering the same questions, and you were sick of asking the same questions. So, to me, I love the constant turnover of hockey. Yeah.
Now, were you restricted in any way in terms of maybe having phone numbers of players so that you could get interviews outside of the times the team would allow?
More so now, because I'm covering the Rangers. I have some player cell phone numbers, and you can text with some guys occasionally. And I'm specifically talking because, you know, Madison Square Garden is very anti-media. They have a media policy that comes down from Jim Dolan that, you know, guys are not allowed to do one-on-ones without the PR guy, you know, listening. In fact, it was funny, the other day I was, after the morning skate at the Garden, I was talking to Ryan McDonough. No, sorry, I have a cold, but talking to Ryan McDonough, the captain of the team. And it was just me and him, and it was a very innocuous conversation. And I look up, and I see there's a PR guy, who I'm actually very good friends with. PR guy standing about 5 feet away, pretending like he's not listening, and I see he's got his cell phone like around his back, and he's taping our conversation, you know, and they basically are looking to catch me to see if I'm misquoting any of their guys, or taking what they're saying out of context. No, say for instance, like Chris Kreider, I have Chris Kreider's cell phone, or I have Mark Stahl's cell phone. If I wanted them for a story, like, you know, text them, hey, you know, wondering about this, or how's your arm, blah, 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 blah. Chances are they will not get back to me because they know they've been, you know, it's been drilled into them from the PR guys at the Garden that they're not allowed to talk to me without the PR staff knowing that all interviews have to be cleared through the PR. It didn't used to be like that. When I first started covering the team, we had everyone's cell phone, and you could get guys on the phone, and, you know, I even had Glenn Sather's cell phone when he was, you know, coaching. If I had a question, I'd call Glenn up on his cell and ask him the question.
Now for the Jets though, was that possible? Because I know you.
Yeah, no, the players would, if you could, and, you know, it goes back to the most important thing about reporting is developing a trust with the people you have to talk to. So, yeah, if you developed a trust with a player, you know, for instance, Lavernius Coles, when he was a wide receiver with the Jets, had a lot of good talks with him. Believe he trusted me as a person. I never did get his cell phone because for whatever reason, he had other trust issues that basically came out in the New York Times story once. But, you know, that's, you know, I could go to him and he knew that, you know, I was asking legitimate questions, I didn't have an agenda, I wasn't looking to burn him, you know. So you kind of have to get that trust going with the player, and then, you know, players will, you know, give you their cell phone. The one time when I used to cover St. John's basketball, and again, because it's a college atmosphere, it's a little more, you know, the schools tend to be more protective of the athletes because they're not professionals, they're student athletes, you know, they're, you know, young, your age, you know, so they tend to be more protective. Mike Jarvis, you know, personally told me that if he found that I was going around looking for guys' cell phones, that, you know, I would never interview him again, you know. So, and that kind of turned into a fight with him, you know. But that's the only time I've really been threatened in terms of you cannot get cell phones.
I understand part of the Tommy Allen.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more prevalent in college. And like Mike Jarvis, Tommy Amaker, bad guy, right? Yeah. You're following?
Oh, sorry, how much different is it doing that with the NFL where you were restricted to begin with, the access was restricted?
Yeah.
How was it trying to form these bonds and form
Well,
trust?
it's much tougher in the NFL to form these bonds because you only get a certain amount of time in there. There are 53 guys in there, and the amount of media in that room outnumbers the players. So to find a player in that atmosphere and, really, start a one-on-one relationship with him is tough. Because there's always some camera crew bursting their way in and, thinking that there was a lot more media scrums and one-on-one. It's really, the way the NFL do it is you have to know the agents. You have to develop a relationship with the agents and then say, hey, by the way, can you put me in touch with your guy? And in the NFL, that's much more of the way to do it. In the NHL, I can go into that room and, like Tanner Glass, who just got put on waivers, we could talk baseball all day, or Dan Boyle is a huge music buff, so we can talk about music and, it's another way of developing a trust. If they see you as just another human being, they're much more comfortable talking to you. Yeah.
How do you deal with like the players, they shut you down and they won't give you the information?
You go on to the next player. There are 23 guys in there. Like I mentioned Dan Boyle. He gets along with some of the media. There are 2 guys in particular on the beat who he just will not talk to. Just doesn't like the way they do their jobs, and he's told them that. So these 2 guys, I mean, they go about their job just talking to the other players. If they need something about Dan, they will ask the other players about Dan. It's very rare that an entire team will shut down one person. You either have to be a really bad reporter with a really bad agenda to get shut down by an entire team, or you have to continually screw up.
Like Morrissey.
What?
Like Morrissey.
Like Mike Morrissey, yeah. You can tell that story. But there are guys that do get shut down by, because the players talk. And, one of the things I know that, Madison Square Garden does with its PR guys is, they have quote-unquote media training before the season. And what that really is, how to not give the media information, what kind of questions we will be asking, and how to recognize a leading question, how to recognize a question that doesn't quite seem is looking for more than they might think, not to talk about their other players, blah blah blah. And they also, because players love scouting reports, the PR staff will give them a scouting report on each of the different beat guys. So before I walk into that room, all 23 guys in there, will know, what the PR staff thinks of me. So, I mean, I haven't had a real problem with anyone on the Rangers, shutting me down. There've been a few guys who've made it clear that they don't like dealing with the media in general, but it hasn't been me, personally. Yeah.
Do you think it's fair that some of these sports, quote unquote, shut down and, I guess, censor, for lack of a word, the media in that way? Like they give you that.
Fair. I mean, they're running a business, so it's a private business. I mean, if I'm looking at it objectively, they have a right to, set whatever media policy they want to set. I think the argument is, the business model is they get money from you. They are charging you a ton of money to come into their building and see their product. They are trying to sell you merchandise. They are trying to get money from you in a million different ways. And the one way that you can have a connection to the players is often through the media. So, I mean, from my standpoint, it would seem to me to behoove these franchises to make things a little bit better so we can do our jobs better, because ultimately, in the end, it's promoting the team and getting them more money, you know? But they don't seem to see it that way. Their sense is that the media has gotten to the point where the only thing that sells is negativity, and each newspaper is trying to outdo the other one with negative stories. You know, we'll always lead with the negative. I mean, I know, for me, I'm not walking into a room thinking, I am going to write a negative story. You know, I am going into that room every day thinking, I am going to write the news of the day. Be it good, be it bad, whatever the news of the day is, you know, and I think there's a fundamental divide between the media and these franchises in how we do our job. I do think, and this gets back to social media, I think that has muddied the waters a lot, and I think that has made these franchises a lot more guarded, because, to be honest with you, like, you don't know who the legitimate reporters are anymore. You know, anyone who wants, and this is both good and bad, anyone who wants can start a Rangers blog and have their opinion on the New York Rangers. You know, anyone can open up a Twitter account and blast out, you know, what's going on with the team and, you know, their opinions on the team. And it is not always 100% clear anymore who is around the team on a daily basis, like me, and who is sitting in their living room trolling on the internet, reading all our stuff and regurgitating it with their opinions. And I think as a result of that, a lot of pro franchises are saying, you know what, we just have to pull back completely, because, you know, basically everyone's looking to take shots at us now. So I think, you know, Twitter has been very good in some ways in getting the news out there quicker, but in a lot of ways, Twitter has really, you know, stuck a knife in really good journalism.
You know what? You say that, the teams don't even trust their own people. I worked for MLB.com for 8 years. When I was covering the Mets, I went to the general manager, I went to the owner and said, listen, I'll grind the house organ for you if you want. You're paying me. I work for you. You give me the information before everybody else. The Dallas Cowboys, their website has everything before any newspaper has it, because they let the guy who runs the website grind the house organ. The Mets wouldn't give me anything. And as a result, I had to play a reporter, and that's part of the reason why I wasn't on the beat anymore, because they complained about me, because I was writing negative stuff. Because I went out and found news, I said, listen, I'm giving you a choice. You're bringing in a free agent to talk to, tell me. Don't make me have to go find it, because I'll find other stuff that you don't want me to find. And they wouldn't do it. So they don't trust that, they don't even trust their own people.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the Mets PR is not the most brilliant PR staff on the planet.
No.
Yeah.
So who runs like the Twitter like website? Because like it's like the official like New York Mets, like who?
Oh, okay. Like who runs, like, just for the Rangers, or the Mets?
Or like in general.
Typically, pro teams will hire like a web staff. Like with the Rangers, we have a guy named, or they have a guy named Jim Cerny, who's been around, you know, hockey for, you know, since he got out of college, 20, 25 years, and he writes the game stories for the team website, Blue Shirts United. He's the one doing, you know, the on-camera interviews, and oftentimes he is the one during the games sending out, you know, the in-game tweets on the official New York Rangers Twitter account. But, and this drives Jim nuts, because a lot of the tweets on the official Rangers account are, you know, these, you know, hey, you know, look at us, look how great we are, and they're kind of goofy tweets. That's the marketing department. So there's a lot of marketing involved with the official accounts too. Yeah.
How do you feel about bloggers? I know you mentioned, I think, a coworker earlier, but in terms of credibility.
Well, the thing is, I mean, don't steal my stuff and pass it off as your own. And, you know, if you are a blogger, you know, it's tough, because I know a lot of, the Islanders used to have something called the bloggers box, where if you ran the New York Islanders, you know, blog, they would actually credential you for the game, and you would sit up. It wasn't in the press box, but they put a little section in the Nassau Coliseum where there were these 30 guys all running their own blogs, and my wife's caught. I will get right back to you, sorry. Hello?
Priorities.
Yes, I was like, Jen, I was talking to you about this, about the blog.
Right.
You can do your own blog, and I still think you should.
I'm sorry, say that
Just
again?
don't, like you said, steal stuff that's not yours and pass it off as your own. I didn't think you would, but.
Should all read Jen's Twitter so I can. Should.
So, yeah, the Mets, the PR staff is not very good. And it hasn't, the same guy who's doing it has been doing it since 1981. He's run their PR department, relations department, it's very protective.
I just thought it was interesting because that's like what we went through, almost exactly. What he was
Yeah,
mentioning, all that
kind
stuff like that. Like I can't even get an interview without Rondeau, without Drew standing behind me, something
Oh,
like that.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that guy.
I mean, I love Drew, but I know
No,
that's
but
his
you know
job.
what? But listen, when I covered baseball, I went from covering professional baseball, and the first year I covered the College World Series, I'm trying to talk to some player behind the batting cage, and the PR hack is screaming at me, you can't do that. And my response is, well, why not? I could talk to Derek Jeter around the batting cage, why can't I talk to this guy?
Yeah.
And they didn't care. So,
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's
And
fine.
for those of you wondering, it's a transmission problem, so.
That sucks.
So basically, like, if you're a blogger, if you're around the team, then you're covering the team. You know, how can I have a problem with you? You're doing your own work. The ones that I have issues with are the ones who basically just are looking around the internet and kind of stealing information left and right and passing it off as their own. Like I said, that makes my job more difficult because, you know, it muddies the waters as to who a legitimate journalist is and who is not, and who the organizations or the players can trust and who they cannot trust. I have an in-joke with Chris Kreider on the Rangers. There was one incident, I think it was last season, I forget, something showed up on a blog that was completely untrue, that Chris Kreider had said something about the Islanders, which he had not said. So we were at Nassau Coliseum, and one of the bloggers who was in the Islanders room asked one of the Islanders, hey, Chris Kreider said this, what's your response? I'm like, well, I know Chris didn't say that. So when I went into the Rangers room, I went up to Chris. I was like, dude, do you hear what's going on here? And the PR guy jumped all over me. He goes, well, why would you ask him that? You know, why would you look for a response if you know he wasn't saying that? And I'm like, you don't see me with my recorder out, you don't see me with my pad out. I am informing him because Chris Kreider is a person to me. I'm just letting him know that other people are gonna come in and hit him up for this. You know, I'm not writing this. I was just trying to do your player a favor here. Right? So from that point, Kreider, who knew what I was doing, he now, whenever he sees me, he just looks at me and goes, blogger. You know, like that. You know, so there, you know, I think that's pretty much how the players view it. But yeah.
So have you ever found having a personal connection with players or anything has caused a conflict with anything you've had to write over the years?
No, I mean, it's never stopped me from writing anything. I mean, you know, they're human beings, so, you know, just like in any situation, you wind up liking some of them more than you like others. So, you know, if you kill a guy, that's too bad, he's a nice guy. Like, there's this guy on the team, Dylan McElrath, who could be like one of the 3 nicest guys I've ever met in my life, you know. But for 3 years, we've all had to write, this guy has no chance of making the NHL because he can't skate, basically. And, you know, he had knee issues, but he also couldn't really skate. I mean, he has made the team, he hasn't played much. But, you know, still, if you ask me, is he going to be like a really good player? My response is no, because he can't skate. There's nothing more I would like than for Dylan to be an NHL superstar, because few people deserve it as much as this kid. I mean, you hear this all the time, he really couldn't be a nicer human being. You really root for this guy. When he actually made the team, it's the only time I've actually seen sports writers like happy that one guy made the team over. You know, we all, the first thing we did was we ran up to his locker stall and we congratulated him, because we were all genuinely happy that this very nice person was finally getting to make the team. But that's, like I said, I still don't think he's going to, you know, be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Because he can't move at a speed proper for this league. Yeah.
So you said that you can't really show emotion when you're in the press box.
Yeah.
So when the Rangers scored in overtime in Game 7 against the Capitals last year, did you not react?
No, no, I mean, my reaction is, okay, the game's over, I have about 30 seconds to get my story in and get in the elevator and get downstairs. I mean, no. I know it's tough, and when I was a kid, you know, I wouldn't have thought I could do this either. But no, I mean, the game is over, start writing, you know. I remember when I worked in Oneonta, I came down to cover Yankees Tigers doubleheader at Yankee Stadium. And I brought one of our news reporters. I forget why I brought him. I forget why I brought Marty down. He was doing some sidebar or something. I forget the circumstances. But he was a ballistic Yankee fan. And he walked around all day like he couldn't believe he was in Yankee Stadium, you know? And I warned him, I was like, dude, just don't embarrass me here. I'm like, you know, I know you're a Yankee fan, but don't do anything stupid. You know, cover the game, do your job. And, you know, I was like 24 at this time, right? And Marty was probably 40 at that point, you know? And there came a point in one of the games where it was a really tight game, and like in the 7th or 8th inning, the Yankees, you know, someone got it, you know, trying to double down the line, and someone scored from first base. And as the guy is rounding third to score, you know, what probably, I think it was the decisive run, out of the corner of my eye, I see Marty tensing, and he's starting to lift out of his chair. And he got about 3 inches, and I elbowed him so hard in the stomach, and he just doubled over and went down. But no one else saw that he was about to cheer. And he was like, he was gasping for breath, going, thank you, thank you. So no, I mean, you really can't. I mean, it says on your press credential, no cheering in the press box. They can throw you out, you know, you're not a fan there. It says no autographs, no cheering, you know, this is a professional environment. So, you know, it's just like Kevin said, my wife is a veterinarian, you know, and we see a lot of, you know, teens who are like, oh, I want to be a vet, I love dogs, or, you know, I love animals. You can't be a vet because you love, you know, you can like animals, but you have to turn those emotions off and do your job. You can't, like everyone who walks into my wife's exam room, she can't be, oh, look at the little Fido, look at the cute dog. You know, that's unacceptable, you know? So it's a learned trait, but it's not that difficult, you know? Yeah.
What kind of writing is like the most frustrating or annoying to write about? Like, for example, like a feature or something, like an assignment that you're given.
Yeah, I think, you know, each different writer has its strengths, you know, I mean, I think at this point in my life, I know what I am, you know, I'm kind of the nuts and bolts, you know, beat reporter. You know, I like reporting the news. To me, these really long, you know, magazine-style takeout stories, you know, where you're talking to, you know, interviewing 20 different people and going back and, you know, starting when the guy was born and, you know, all these different anecdotes for his life. That's, you know, that's probably, I could do it, and I have done it, but it's tougher for me. And meanwhile, you have a lot of reporters, you know, magazine people who, you know, if they're asked to tell the story, you know, in 400 or 450 words, like I can do on a daily basis, you know, their lead is 7 paragraphs long and they never get to the news, you know. So I think each person has their own strengths and weaknesses. For me, you know, I am not, you know, the giant investigative reporter who's gonna, you know, do a, you know, a 4,000 word story as well as someone else is gonna do that. Yeah.
What is something you like to do when you're doing during your off time?
I like playing drums, I like being with my kids. My buddy's got a boat, I like being out on the water. You know, we were out, it was, actually, I talk about no cheering in the press box. After the game on, what's today, Wednesday? So they had a game Monday night. And after the game, they hand out press notes, you know, on the game. And at the very bottom, they have, you know, the team's schedule for the next day. So it comes out and it says, tomorrow, off. I stood up and cheered because my friend had already texted me, dude, it's gonna be nice tomorrow, 8:30 on the boat, let's go. So, day off. I was on the Hudson yesterday from 8:30 to 4 p.m., up to Poughkeepsie and back, great day. That's, you know, I don't know, I mean, during the season, there's very little time like that. I like watching movies, you know, I like being at home at night and having dinner with my wife and kids. You know, nothing outrageous. Like I said, at the beginning, you know, as far as a plan B for what else I would have done with my life, I never really got to that point. I never really came up. I still don't know what else I would do. If I got fired tomorrow, I would really be, like my buddy on the boat yesterday said, what we have to do is retire together, move down to Florida, buy a boat down there, and start like a sea tow operation down there. I'm like, all right. But, you know, I mean, it's always someone else coming up with the idea for me.
Do your kids like your job? Like, do they want to follow in those footsteps or?
It's funny you ask that, because the answer is absolutely not. I mean, no, they do not. My bigger daughter is a sophomore out of Michigan. And strangely enough, though, she is writing for the school newspaper in sports. She thought she would try it out, and she's decided that she really likes it. She's writing some really good features, and you know, she sends me every clip. But as a career, it's not even on the horizon for her. And like, as far as my younger daughter, she's become friends with a lot of the guys on her high school hockey team. So she's gotten a little bit more into the sport. For her, she loves the fact that I have this job because all her teachers and all her friends on the hockey team think her dad's cool. So that makes her cool, you know? And even though the Rangers have closed practices, I've brought, you know, Phoebe has come, Silvana's come to a lot too, you know, so I can bring him to practices. And, you know, the other day, Phoebe brought two of her, on Columbus Day, they were out of school, so I brought Phoebe and two of her friends to practice, so that, you know, Phoebe got to be the cool friend, you know, so she likes that kind of status. She also, I think, likes the fact that I travel a little bit. She doesn't like it when I'm gone, but she likes it when I come back. So, I think I think it makes her realize that she misses me. Yeah.
You say you play the drums, what's your favorite song with that? Like, what type of beat or whatever?
Oh, I play the drums. I would not say I'm an accomplished drummer.
Okay.
So you're not part of a band?
What?
You're not part of a band?
No, it's impossible to do during the summer. I play with people, and when I was up in Oneonta, we had a band that would travel around the state and play gigs, which was cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it was great. It's a great release. No, I am strictly garage rock. Anything with loud drums I'm into. I don't know if I have a favorite song to play. Maybe Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know.
Did you make any money from that?
Oh God, no! Making money in music is harder to do than journalism. I mean, I am not a good musician. I know a lot of good musicians who are doing other things during the day and then gigging at night because you can't make money at music. So it's just a fun thing to do. Why do you play? Or?
No, I just have friends that play.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I have a guy I went to high school with who in high school, listening to this guy play the guitar, I was like, he's going to be an Ozzy Osbourne's band. It's just what's going to, and it turns out he is good enough. He actually tours, 4 months out of the year with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. But he can't really make a living, just doing that. He has to have another job. It's not enough. It's really.
I heard from my friend that it costs more to produce the music than you get back from sales.
Yeah, record sales are, they're dead. You can't make money putting out albums. It's all in the touring now. Yeah.
When you were growing up, did you always want to do something related to this, or were you just
Yeah, I wish I had been a better athlete, but you just know that you're not coordinated enough. I wanted to be a pro baseball player, and by the time I was 11, the wheels start going, well, I'm not going to be a pro baseball player. What can I do to be around pro baseball? And my dad was a writer, my grandfather's a writer, my mom has written. It's kind of like the family business, so it wasn't too tough to figure out. Yeah.
Who do you enjoy interviewing the most and why?
Let's see. On the team, Hank's always fun to talk to, the goalie. He's a gentleman, and whenever he speaks, usually it's a story. Even though, in terms of outrageous, there was an offensive lineman on the Jets, a guy named Pete Kendall, who just spoke his mind. And as a sports writer, you love guys who speak their mind. And so, you would walk into the Jets room and make a right turn and just plant yourself at Pete's locker every day. And, it got to the point where the sports editor called and said, you can't write the offensive line every day. I'm like, but it's so good. The Rangers have been coached pretty well to not really show their personality to us in the room through their interviews, so they're very guarded in what they say. Ryan McDonough, the captain, he's got a great personality, but he's got the most vanilla quotes in the world when you talk to him. Mark Stahl, I love talking to Mark Stahl. He's, because he's almost the one guy in the room who doesn't see it as we're the media. He's been around so long, and he's just so comfortable with himself, and because he's got 3 brothers in the league, just so comfortable with the process that we're just dudes that he talks to, and whatever we write. He knows it's not personal, so he's a really good guy to talk to. Not always the most interesting guy. Matt Zuccarello, if you can get him to talk, is very interesting to talk to. He's had a very interesting life. But he's another guy he's pretty much had it. He doesn't want to deal with it. So, you know, the one guy, and I don't know if you remember him, he was with the Rangers around the lockout, was with the Devils for a long time, Bobby Holy. This guy he had an opinion about everything. He was from Czechoslovakia before it was the Czech Republic, when it was still a communist country. And he was one of these guys who escaped a communist country. He got out from behind the Iron Curtain, and he made it to the United States. And he was a good hockey player. He was a third line guy. He was a big body. He wasn't necessarily a goal scorer. He would just physically beat you up in front of the net. He did his thing. You know, he was. And the Rangers, after watching him win a couple of Stanley Cups with the Devils, gave him this outrageous 5-year, $9 million contract. So he's making $9 million a year. He would walk into the room every day wearing a United States flag as a tie and just pontificate. He goes, "This is ridiculous. This is the best country on the planet." He was the most patriotic American I've ever met, because someone would pay him $9 million a year to play hockey. He just thought it was the greatest thing. And like I said, he read every book that was out there. He listened to every political debate. Like, he was, you know, you talk about having a guy's cell phone. Like, he was the guy, he was my go-to guy, you know, if I needed anything. But, like, he would call me up, like, you know, during a presidential election, he would call me up. "Did you see the debate last night?" "Yeah." And then he'd have me on the phone for 40 minutes, like, just dissecting the debate. He's probably the most interesting guy, just in terms of personality. Yeah.
I don't know if you know this because you've been here, but Columbus just fired their coach, and now they have hired John Tortorella. And
Yeah, that was.
I just want to know. I just want to know what you think about having him back in the league, since he's just been.
Well, I don't have to cover him, so that's great. He's someone else's problem now.
So when he was on, like when he was with the Rangers, did you find it hard to talk to him?
It's the way we talk, and I'll say this stuff. Let me say this about John. Like, the stuff you see, that really is only 50% of it. I had a good relationship with him. I don't know if you know this, he loves dogs. Loves dogs. He runs a shelter. He rescues dogs. He knew my wife was a veterinarian. He was always pulling me aside to talk dogs, to talk, you know, like getting advice on how to set up a shelter. You know, there's a part of him that no one ever sees, right? And I like that part of him. And you could have a fight with him, and 3 minutes later, you can talk to him, because as he always said, like, conflict is good. You know, it advances the story quicker, basically, you know. Having said that, covering him as a media member, it was like being in an abusive relationship. Because, I mean, he was awful. You know, he would yell, he would just, you know, he would try and belittle you. He would come into the room and the first thing is, "Let's make this quick so I don't have to stand around you people." Like, you know, as if we were giving him a disease, you know. I mean, it was, you know, I guess the famous one was like when he wanted to shut it down during the playoffs. He came in one day and decided he was going to say nothing but "no idea" to any question. So he was asked 6 or 7 questions. He kept saying "no idea," and he goes, "All right," and he starts walking out. And Katie, who used to work for ESPN New York, kind of said, "Hey, John, when's your mother's birthday?" And he looked at her and he goes, "No idea." And so I mean, he could be a real asshole, you know, and on purpose. And like, the one that stood out to me with Torts was, I forget where we were, but it was right after the Boston Marathon bombing. Torts is a Boston guy, you know, and the only story the next day was, "Oh my God, someone blew up the end of the Boston Marathon." and who cares who the Rangers were playing that day? It didn't matter, because, when something like that happens, it really makes you realize that, the Rangers against, the Sabres on a Thursday night, really, it's not that big a deal. So we were asking, towards before the game, and I think it was Jeff Klein from the New York Times goes, John, we know you're from Boston, and, obviously, and he just cut him off. And he goes, don't ask me about that. Why would you ask me about that? Don't ask me about that. Talk to me about hockey. And we all looked at him and we were like, we don't feel like talking about hockey today. We just kind of all walked away. But that's how he was. He could be like, his stuff was always more important than anything else going on in the world. And it's kind of, I'm happy for him. He's a good coach. I gotta think that, Brandon Dubinsky's head just flew off, at the thought, because Torts ran him out of New York once, so I can't imagine that Duby's happy to play for this guy. So I had, on YouTube, you always see the fights Torts had with Larry Brooks, right? They're famous. We had one, he and I had one, in Carolina before, and it was Mark Stahl was dealing, whether he was coming back from a concussion or his eye problem. There was some Mark Stahl injury issue that he didn't want to talk about. So, where it's just like the four of us standing in a hallway in Carolina, at noon, no TV cameras. And, I got my recorder out, and I think Larry asked a question about Mark, and Torts gave him a non-answer. And then, Jeff Klein, then I asked a question, and he said he wasn't, he goes, I'm not, and then Jeff Klein followed up with another question, and Torts kind of just went, all right, I'm going to talk about this, meaning whatever was talked about before Stahl. I'm going to talk about this. I'm not talking about that, like putting his hand in my face. I'm not talking about that, putting his hand in Jeff's face. So if you guys got anything else, I'll talk about that. And I just looked at him, and I just had that moment, this was in his last year. I'd been through 4.5 seasons of this, and I had that Danny Glover moment. I was like, I am just too old for this shit. I don't need to be treated that way. So I turned off my cell phone and I just walked away. Didn't say anything to him, just turned off my cell phone and walked away. And I'm walking down the hallway and I hear someone else try and ask him a Mark Stahl question. And I hear Torts go, he blew up. He said, I told you I'm not going to talk about that, and if you're not happy about it, you can just take your ball and walk the fuck away like that asshole did. So that became a catchphrase, take your ball and walk the fuck away. But it was funny, because 2 or 3 days later, I see him in the hallway at Madison Square Garden, and I walked up to him, and I was like, John, are we okay? And he put his arm around me, and he was like, of course we're okay. We've known each other far too long. And that meant nothing. Don't worry about it. But he's psycho. I mean, he really is psycho. He'll kick that team's ass. Yeah. They're going to win a game or two. Or it could go horribly wrong, and he's going to try and storm into some other team's locker room, get fired again. But no, good for them, and good for us. Yeah.
Do you find AV easier to talk to? Or?
Yeah, it's funny, I do. He's much more personable, he's much more easy. He comes in, he doesn't, he's not going to light us on fire, he's not yelling at us, he'll give us a joke here and there. But that being said, as a sports writer, Torts was almost easier to talk to because you could get a story from Torts. AV rarely comes in and gives you a story because his quotes are pretty straightforward. It's usually only when he wants to get a message across to his team that he'll say, like when we were up in Montreal, And he just came out after the game and he goes, "We got schooled." I'm like, all right, well, I got my lead quote, you know. AV is much more, you know, just even keel. But having said that, I have, and still to this day, have much more of a relationship with Torts. I feel like I know Torts as a human being. I know nothing about AV because he keeps us so far away. He comes into the press room, does his, you know, 5 minutes with us each, you know, on a practice day, we get him for 5 minutes or whatever. You know, on game day, we get him in the morning, and then we get him after the game. It's probably 6 minutes total. And that is the only time we see him. It's not like we're bumping into him in a hallway and we're BSing with him, and, you know, it's not like, and, you know, even when, we know he has 2 daughters, you know, I could tell you nothing about him. He doesn't want to tell us anything about him. Like with Torts, I know, like, he's been living on edge for the last 2 years because his son Dominic is serving his second tour over in Afghanistan. And I know how hard that is on him, how hard that is on his wife. All I know about AV is that he's divorced, you know, so, yeah.
Do you feel like there's like a sense of urgency in the room now that like kind of Henrik's window is kind of closing to win a cup?
Yeah, I think it's not just Henrik. I think they know that this group has been together for a long time and groups don't stay together. You know, like I think at this time next year, there's a good chance that that team is very different, win or lose. You know, I think the mix is almost has a sell date by, and I think this mix is getting a little stale.
Do you see them re-signing Keith Yandel or
No.
no?
No, and no. I mean, because some team's going to give him $5.5, $6 million a year, and they can't afford it unless he has an outrageous year, you know, and you're going to get rid of Kevin Klein, or, you know, maybe if you trade Derek Brassard's contract.
No.
Yeah. But actually, Brass is a guy that I could see gone by next year too. But anyway, and plus they have this defenseman Brady Shea.
Oh yeah, we know about it.
Yeah, he's going to be up, so they need to clear space for him too.
And so they still have to re-sign like Kreider, and then they have to re-sign Miller and Hayes. So
Yeah.
is most of that cap space, like when Dan Boyle goes, is that going to go to Kreider?
Yeah, and again, if they don't do great this year, you know, don't be surprised if they don't look to mix it up and trade one of those guys. You know, I mean, if Kreider does not have a tremendous season, I think they could punt on him.
But would they trade Nash first, or they would?
They might, yeah. They're only 2 years on the deal, so some team might. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a busy summer. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, this is kind of unrelated, but have you ever done any TV work? Because you have a fantastic voice.
Oh. I've done more radio.
More radio?
I do a lot of radio gigs. TV. Like I've been on Bruce Beck's show, like on NBC. I've done, you know, some, you know, where they get you into the studio, some stuff up in Toronto. Not a lot. I remember when I worked up in Oneonta, Hartwick started up a football team, and they were going to, on Oneonta cable access or whatever it was, they were going to broadcast a Friday night game. So they asked me to be the color analyst for the game. So they set me up, and they set me up with I was doing an on-field, like a setup before the game. So it was a wireless mic and like headphones, so I could hear what Ed Ryan, the play-by-play guy, was asking me. And I remember there was this antenna on the headphones, so I could get the radio transmission. And without realizing it, like I was nervous being on camera, so I was kind of doing like this hippie shit type thing. And this antenna was like flapping. They said it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen on TV. So I'm not a natural. No, radio I'm much more comfortable with, because with this face, I'm behind closed doors. So.
Face is bad.
Yeah. But thanks. You got anything else?
It was a good question.
Oh, all right.
You good?
Yeah, are we good? I'm gonna go to practice then. Yes,
Would you be open to giving us your email in case we ever want to ask?
absolutely, yeah. Let me just write that.
Number 2.
How do you write on this? Yeah, just, this is my work email.
Yeah, all right.
It's just Gross, my last name, A, my first initial, at northjersey.com. Please email, feel free. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Yeah.
Do you think just, so, it's like clear, just, the like timeline of where you worked? Because I
Sure.
know you said, journal news from 93 to 2007, but before then?
I was only on I graduated Syracuse 89. Only on to Daily Star from 89 to 93. I was the wire editor there, 89 to 90. And then a sports writer my last 3 years there, 91, 92, 93. Best part of that was I got to cover the Oneonta Yankees, which was New York Penn League, short season Class A. And in the 91 season in Oneonta, they had Jorge Posada and Andy Pettit as 19-year-olds there. So I got to meet those guys young. So 89 to 93, the Daily Star, 93 to 07 at the Journal News, and November 07 to present, and hopefully for some time into the future at the Bergen Record, based on if we keep publishing. Yeah. And one thing to remember going into this is newspapers are sick. It is not a business model that is sustainable at this point. Fewer and fewer people with each generation are reading newspapers. Everyone's getting their information via tablets or basically, like, I do this at every class I talk to. How many of you legitimately will read a newspaper on a daily basis? Right, and this is why I am worried about my job. You saw at the Daily News, they just basically laid off half their sports section. That means there's a lot of good sports writers out there scraping for work. And they're not getting full-time jobs when they do find jobs. They're getting freelance or, they're getting day jobs, basically being paid per deal. There are more jobs out there now on the internet, but, the thing to know about that is that unless you really have a name, which is kind of like a catch-22, how do you make a name if there's no place to make a name for yourself? The internet jobs are also typically not great paying. Most of them are not full-time and they don't carry benefits, which is something you start worrying about when you have a family or even just yourself for health. So it's not the easiest business to crack into. The people who are cracking in now are really kind of the hybrids who will write and also be able to do, like you said, do some TV work, do some radio work, do podcasts. You have to, you're looking at a dinosaur here. The people just don't go and work for a newspaper anymore and just want to be a writer. You kind of want to do everything across the board, and you have to get training across the board. Even with a blog, it's not enough just to write some words and put it up on a blog. You have to know how to take pictures with your cell phone and post pictures to your blog, and maybe put some audio up there, because it really is multimedia. Everything now is multimedia, including newspapers, so that's my spiel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
150 words by 6 o'clock on Sunday.
Thank you.
It's okay, I got the recording. It's no big deal.
color radio with, you know, yeah, we have.
Which is really, did you get a word
No, there's no special.